Hi, everyone. I'm Simone Boyce. You're watching NBC News Now. Here's what's happening. Day one of the G7 summit. President Biden and the 6 other G7 leaders saying they'll donate 1 billion doses of COVID vaccines. Now, the other hot topic of the day, the president's upcoming summit with Vladimir Putin in Geneva.
Mr. President, what's your message to Putin?
So you have to deliver it.
Back here at home, people out of work in Alaska, Iowa, Missouri, and Mississippi may have to dig a little deeper in their wallets. Republican governors in those states all shutting off federal pandemic unemployment benefits 3 months early. And whatever you do, do not feed the peacocks. That's the message from LA County officials as hordes of these brightly colored birds are wreaking havoc and disturbing the peace in suburban neighborhoods.
A peafowl in our neighborhood is a wild animal. If they want to come and eat, they're going to come and eat.
It's annoying to those of us that are trying to live here peacefully to have other people providing a habitat.
We start today with President Biden at the G7. NBC News foreign correspondent Matt Bradley is in St. Ives, England, and NBCNews.com senior White House reporter Shannon Pettypiece is here with me now. Matt, today G7 world leaders committing 1 billion COVID doses and also endorsing a global minimum tax of at least 15% for companies. Tell us more about what we can expect from today's talks.
I mean, this is a wide-ranging set of talks here. And the fact is that Joe Biden and the rest of these leaders have already committed to that 15% last week. And they're going to be proceeding, trying to show that this G7 event isn't all about glad-handing amongst global leaders. It's actually about G7, the world's strongest economies, trying to reach out and helping the world. And for Joe Biden and for other leaders, the pandemic is the perfect opportunity to make that demonstration. Now, for Joe Biden, what he has at stake here is he's trying to differentiate himself from his predecessor, who treated a lot of these international institutions like the G7, like the United Nations, the European Union, NATO, with something like contempt. And so when Joe Biden steps out on the world stage, as he is for the first time as president, and, you know, this is really a big difference from the Zoom diplomacy that was going on before. He's trying to show that America is renewing its vows to international diplomacy and to these very international institutions that really created the groundwork for the modern world order that we know it ever since World War II. That's why with Boris Johnson yesterday, he signed what was considered an update to the Atlantic Charter that was signed back in 1941 between Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Winston Churchill. That was what formed the basis for what would become NATO and the United Nations. So again, this whole thing is an exercise in trying to firm up a global community, the same kind of global community that President Trump and autocrats throughout the world, like Vladimir Putin, like Xi Jinping of China, seem to hope will go away.
And Shannon, coming to you now, how does the minimum global tax fit in with the president's domestic policy agenda? And what would this mean for the way multinational corporations do business?
Well, this is part of this broader theme we have been hearing from President Biden about wanting corporations, wanting the wealthiest Americans to pay what he considers their fair share, to pay more. And we have heard him rail a number of times against companies that pay essentially no corporate tax in the U.S. because of a variety of various accounting schemes. And there is a criticism, not just in the U.S., but globally, that companies will shift shift operations, at least for taxation capacity, to certain regions that have the lowest taxation. Here's a statement that was put out today regarding that. It said the U.S. priority is a critical. It said this U.S. priority is a critical step towards ending the decades-long race to the bottom that pushes nations to compete over who can offer the lowest tax rate to large corporations at the expense of protecting workers, investing in infrastructure, and growing the middle class. Now, a giant caveat here, this global corporate 15% minimum tax is not going to happen in the U.S. anytime soon. That would take the act of Congress. The Republicans in Congress, at least, have firmly said they are against any tax increases whatsoever. That is a red line there. So at least for now, while Republicans control one branch of government and there does not appear to be 60 votes in a Senate for a global corporate minimum tax, that's not going to happen. But maybe something down the road potentially, and certainly something we could see in other countries, as a number of other countries agree to this as well.
And Shannon, we can't ignore the optics of all this. This is something that Matt brought up just a few moments ago. The president looking to reassert the image of American leadership at the G7. What is his strategy going into today's talks?
So people who have worked with the president before, administration officials, they say that personal relationships are very key to President Biden. So in addition to the public rhetoric you're hearing about America being back, they say look for what is going to happen behind the scenes. And they say that President Biden is really known for being able to, or at least trying to be able to, broker connections with people over cocktails, over dinner, over drinks, like this happening right now in the UK, in these little side-to-side, one-to-one meetings to develop that personal relationship. He firmly believes that personal relationships are an extension of foreign policy. So I think that's one of the things, undercurrents that's going to be going on in all this that you can't get with that type of Zoom diplomacy that Matt mentioned a moment ago.
And Matt, we're also hearing about this potential royal appearance, the Queen and members of the royal family joining G7 leaders for dinner. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean, the Queen has met with every single U.S. president except Lyndon Johnson, essentially since World War II. So Joe Biden is going to be joining a very exclusive, but a quite large club now of presidents who have met the Queen. They're going to be meeting tonight for dinner at the Eden Project, which is close to where I am here in Cornwall. This is essentially kind of a biodome that has a lot of different plants and species from all over the world. It's a gesture showing how the G7 is committed to environmental impact. And that was, I was out in front of the hotel that's hosting the G7 today. A lot of protesters were talking about the environment. That's the main topic among those who were protesting. It's one of the main topics for the G7, probably coming after dealing with the pandemic and dealing with global autocrats. But, showing that the royal family has this same shared commitment to the environment. And we just heard from other members of the royal family today saying that they, too, are affirming their commitment to the environment. When it comes to royals, they don't really like to dip into politics, but the environment, conservation, these sorts of issues, it gives them a bit of a pass, and they do weigh in. They do show that they do support environmental measures. It's a rare moment when members of the royal family can be political. And so this subtle political move tonight with the Queen hosting all of these world leaders at the Eden Project, this is a signal that so many world leaders need to be serious about the environment and that the royal family is behind them.
Yeah, and we know that climate will continue to be a big issue among these global leaders as they meet together. Matt Bradley, Shannon Pettypiece, thank you both. Democrats are calling for an investigation after reports that former President Trump's Justice Department seized their data. The New York Times, first to report the DOJ subpoenaed Apple for data of House Intelligence Committee members, their aides, and family members to investigate leaks. Congressman Adam Schiff says he was one of the targets.
It violates, I think, the separation of powers, but it also makes the Department of Justice just a fully owned subsidiary of the president's personal legal interest.
NBC News correspondent Ken Delanian joins me now from Washington. Ken, so many moving parts to track with this story. Walk us through it, starting at the beginning.
Sure, Simone. Well, recall back in the early days of the Trump administration, there were a number of very serious leaks of classified information, leaks that arguably made the public understand some really bad things that were going on inside the Oval Office. For example, that Donald Trump was telling the Russians it was fine that they interfered in the election and was disclosing classified information to the Russian foreign minister in the Oval Office. So at that time, the Attorney General Jeff Sessions gave a statement decrying leaks and saying he wanted to get to the bottom of it. Donald Trump was screaming from the rafters, let's go after the leakers. So what we now have learned is that at that time, the Justice Department sent a subpoena to Apple and at least one other service provider, according to the New York Times, seeking records associated with 12 people associated with the House Intelligence Committee. And as you said, there were two lawmakers involved. One was Adam Schiff. The other was Eric Swalwell. Let's take a listen to what Swalwell had to say about this.
There's very much that we don't know, much that we want to learn. And Jim, this isn't really about me or Chairman Schiff. This is about everyday Americans, who don't want to see their government weaponize law enforcement against them because of their political beliefs.
As you can see, not only Swalwell, but many other Democrats are calling this a gross abuse of power and saying that the Biden administration needs to get to the bottom of what happened, Simone.
Ken, do we know if the department actually did anything with the data? I mean, what happened?
We don't know the answer to that. Neither do these lawmakers. They got a cursory email from Apple after a gag order was lifted. The gag order had prevented Apple from even telling these lawmakers that their data, it's metadata, it's not content, it's call records, email records, that their data had been seized. So the lawmakers have learned that the records were seized, but they have no idea what happened with it, except that the Justice Department has told them that the investigation has been closed, Simone.
And Ken, you also have new reporting about the House Intel Committee's frustration with the current DOJ. What's going on there?
Yeah, a committee aide told us that they have not been able to get answers out of the Biden Justice Department. They understood that this was the Trump Justice Department taking this action, but now Biden's folks are in charge. And this is the Democrats on the House Intelligence Committee saying, hey, tell us more about these records you seized. And they're not getting good answers. Now, part of that is this is a very odd situation. Normally, the targets of criminal investigation don't have a right to demand information about what the Justice Department did. But in this case, you're talking about senior members of Congress and the Intelligence Committee, which is entrusted with the nation's secrets, and they want to get to the bottom of what happened here.
Look, we know that the Justice Department investigates leaks all the time. I mean, you've covered how the Obama administration was actually criticized for their crackdown on leakers. But how unusual is it to see them take steps like this?
It's without precedent as far as anyone can tell, Simone. The only time the Justice Department has gone after these kinds of records is in corruption cases, when members of Congress are accused of serious fraud and abuses of power. Never in a leak investigation that anyone can remember. And again, I can't stress enough, it's not just any members of Congress. These are members of the Intelligence Committee. They have special access to, for example, covert CIA operations and other kinds of secrets, the names of sources inside Russia. So they are inherently trusted by the executive branch. So what my sources are saying is there better darn well have been a really good reason for this to have happened. Otherwise, there's going to be a lot of accountability there, Simone.
Yeah, well, hope we get some answers. Thank you so much, Ken. Senators reaching a tentative agreement on infrastructure. But what will it take for American cities to actually see some of these improvements? And what about the cost? $579 billion in new spending, adding up to a total of $1.2 trillion over the next 8 years. The 5 Democrats and 5 Republicans say the plan would be, quote, fully paid for and not include tax increases. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Leanne Caldwell joins me now to talk about this. Now, Leanne, the group didn't offer details on exactly how they will pay for this, but what do we know so far about their proposal?
Hey, Simone, we don't know a lot. We know those top line numbers that you just mentioned, $579 billion of new spending over the next 5 years. We know that they do offer to pay for it with no new taxes. Things that have been leaked about this new plan is that it does include a gas tax tied to inflation and an electric vehicle user fee, which the White House argues is in fact a tax, and they say that it violates their pledge not to tax middle class and lower class Americans. And so there's already problems with this from the beginning, but we're hoping to learn more details about exactly what this would go toward beyond the detail that we know it's traditional infrastructure and how else they would pay for it, Simone.
Leanne, can they get enough senators on board, though, here? I mean, what's the ultimate fate of this proposal?
Well, that is always the question, especially in the Senate. There's 5 Republicans and 5 Democrats who crafted this proposal. So we know there's 10 votes, but that is a far cry from the 60 votes necessary for anything to pass. And if there's only 10 Republicans that get on board, that means you need all 50 Democrats. Well, there's already Democrats who are very skeptical of this. Senator Ed Markey of Massachusetts told me that if there is not a major climate change proposal in this proposal, which there's not, then that is something that he cannot support. And so there's already one senator who isn't supportive of this. So you need to find another Republican, which is difficult. So the road to 60 is going to be very difficult, Simone, and that's what they are potentially working on at this moment.
Leanne, also want to ask you about the Democrats who are continuing their push for voting reform. A House subcommittee is actually focusing on that today. So give us the highlights.
Yeah, well, they're focusing these hearings, or it's one of a series of hearings. The chair of that subcommittee says that they're going to hold 16 hearings. And what they're talking about, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. Now, that is legislation that Senate is not the For the People Act. It's much more limited. It would try to put back into place what the Supreme Court gutted several years ago about pre-clearance, where districts who have traditionally discriminated against people of color in voting would have to get support and authority from the Department of Justice in order to change their laws. Now, this is much more limited legislation than the For the People Act, but it is also something that Democrats say is a priority and they want to pass alongside the H.R. 1 For the People Act. And it's also something that Senator Joe Manchin and Republican Lisa Murkowski have said they also support. So the House is moving forward with this proposal. They hope to have legislation in the fall, and they want to do it alongside, pass it with the Voting Rights Act, or the For the People Act, Simone.
Leanne Caldwell with an update from Capitol Hill on a few important items there. Thank you so much. Well, something that should have happened a long time ago. That's Senator Cory Booker's reaction to news that a Muslim American judge will sit on a federal bench for the first time in our history. The Senate confirming Zaheed Qureshi by an 81-16 vote to serve as a district judge in New Jersey. NBC News politics reporter DeRay Gregorian joins me now. DeRay, Judge Qureshi has a really incredible story. I mean, he's the son of Pakistani immigrants. Tell us more about his family background and how that ties into his legal career.
Well, his family came here about 50 years ago. His father was a doctor. He was born in New York, grew up in New Jersey, and went to Rutgers Law School. And then went into private practice, intending that to be his path, but that path changed.
And DeRay, Judge Qureshi joined the Army after the September 11th attacks. I mean, how long was he in the military, and how did he end up back on the bench?
Well, he after September 11th, he decided he wanted to dedicate his life to public service and went into the Army. He was a captain, a JAG captain. He served in Iraq did 2 tours in Iraq, was decorated, and then came back, worked for DHS and the U.S. Attorney's Office.
And then, one more question. DeRay, I just wanted to ask you, what are we hearing from him about this? I mean, this is such a historic moment. Are we hearing any reaction from the judge?
I haven't heard anything from him, but Cory Booker's reaction kind of said it all. This was history and a very long time in the making.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, DeRay. All right, Darnella Frazier awarded a Pulitzer Prize citation, a special designation after her video of George Floyd's murder helped lead to a guilty verdict for former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin. Frazier was just a teenager, 17 years old, when she filmed Floyd's murder. Her video contradicted those initial police reports and sparked protests around the country. The Pulitzer Board says Frazier highlighted the, quote, crucial role of citizens in journalists' quest for truth and justice. We'll be right back.
We are here to announce reopening day in Chicago. You masked up, you got vaxxed up, and now it's time for you to get up, get out of the house this summer and fully and safely and enjoy the events of the best city on the planet.
Well, Chicago and the entire state of Illinois saying goodbye to capacity restrictions and social distancing mandates today. That's got to feel pretty good. NBC News correspondent Shaq Brewster is outside Wrigley Field in Chicago. What a background there, Shaq. And today the Cubs welcomed fans at full capacity for the first time since 2019. So how's it feeling out there? I also hear there might be a celebrity guest appearance.
That's right, and we're about an inning away from that. That's the 7th inning stretch with Bill Murray there. But, you know, fans are excited, and you're hearing a lot of excitement here. You may not be able to see it behind me, but that's because there's 40,000 people in that stadium behind me here at the historic Wrigley Field. And, look, this is the largest crowd it has seen since September of 2019. So the players are certainly excited. The fans are certainly excited. I want you to listen to what an executive from the Chicago Cubs organization told me. Listen here.
It's a true opening day 2.0. And so we're doing everything. We're pulling out all the stops to make sure that people will really take a moment to enjoy this experience. Like, this is a historic moment after everything that we've gone through. And even opening this ballpark earlier this year, today is the day where we basically say, you know, we're back.
They said they're pulling out all the stops. That includes having Hall of Famers coming to do the opening pitch. That includes all employees wearing welcome home shirts, and you see a welcome home on the field there. There is a lot of excitement here. You're going to see games like this all through the weekend, and it's also just a beautiful day to just go out, grab a beer, and watch baseball. Not that I've done it yet, but I have some plans later on after we talk.
Yeah, sure. Shaq, also want to ask you about the business owners who must be excited too, because, I mean, we've talked about the fans, but people's livelihoods have been on the line for the past year. So what are businesses saying about having fans back to their restaurants and shops today?
Right, and it's important we know, I mean, this is the fun part of the reopening, but yeah, you have businesses, restaurant, bars, hair salons able to open at full capacity, so they don't have to worry about how many people are coming in at once. They don't have to have the social distancing markers. There's actually a hotel across the street from this stadium here, and I saw them this morning pulling up those circles off the tile floor, marking the social distancing and marking where people should be standing. You get the sense that that is going to be happening all across the city as these restrictions and measures continue to be lifted. I want you to listen to my conversation with the co-owner of a sports sales store that's right here in Wrigleyville. They've been going through a tough time with the pandemic, but listen to what the co-owner told me.
We have been waiting, and we're glad that the city opened up, and it's going to be a great day to see all these fans down here.
Has it been hard the past year? Give me some idea of what it's been like getting through this pandemic.
This neighborhood's really directly affected by its fans. So, like I said, when the fans are out here, it's just a better atmosphere, and we just love seeing it.
And you're also seeing the mayor do what she can to incentivize people to go out to these locations. That includes putting in communities all across the city $250 gift cards at different businesses. And if a person goes up and you say, open Chicago, it's like a special keyword, a magic word to the hostess, then you may end up with that $250 gift card. So they're really doing whatever they can to get people out enjoying their time now that they see the positivity rate decreasing and the vaccination rate increasing. Simone?
Open Chicago. I love that. It kind of sounds like a speakeasy. And I want to continue on that thread that you just brought up. So things are looking pretty good in Illinois. The state recorded its lowest number of hospitalizations and its lowest positivity rate yesterday since the start of the pandemic. But what do vaccinations look like there?
Yeah, they look a little bit differently across the state and when you compare it to the city. The state actually looks like it's going to hit President Biden's goal of that 70% of adults with at least one shot. They're at about 60% of adults with at least one vaccination dose, just over 50% fully vaccinated. For the city, you see the number there, about 48% when you talk about those vaccinations. So the city has a little bit more work to do, but you're hearing about the incentives. The city also having vaccination events, so more than 70 events across the city where they're going out getting people vaccinated. That is the priority, because if you listen to what the mayor says, if you listen to what the governor says, the vaccinations were the key to getting us to this reopening. and they want us to be able to stay in this position, and they want it to only continue. So that's why you have officials and city leaders pushing these vaccinations as hard as they can.
Well, Shaq, thank you so much for your reporting. Hope you get to have some fun, too. Well, as you just saw, that snapshot from Illinois, the country's vaccine rollout is in full gear. But there are some zip codes across America that are lagging behind. NBC News Now correspondent Isu Gutierrez visited New York City's lowest vaccinated neighborhood to understand why this is happening and what can be done about it.
New York has gone from being one of the states hit hardest by COVID to a success story for inoculations. But if you zoom into New York City, you'll find communities that are falling behind, hidden by the overall numbers. Some zip codes have full vaccination rates under 30%, almost as low and sometimes even lower than Mississippi's rate, which is the least vaccinated state in the nation.
That's surprising to you?
Kind of, yeah, because I mean, we're in such a heavy populated state that you think that people would be more cautious and more caring for others, but it's kind of neglectful and it's kind of messed up a little bit.
Low income, poverty, all that is down, so most likely this is probably how it is in a lot of places all over the United States.
There are pockets with numbers like this in other major cities like Chicago and Phoenix, too. A study by the Kaiser Family Foundation that analyzed more than 2,400 counties across the United States found that areas with higher poverty rates and lower health insurance coverage often face lower vaccination rates. We wanted to learn why this was happening, so we headed to Far Rockaway, Queens, New York City's zip code with the lowest COVID-19 vaccination rate.
I thought it was population control at first, conspiracy theories.
So I'm a registered nurse. I feel really leery about a vaccine that was put together in less than a year. And I've seen personally people have adverse reactions.
I believe that the vaccination itself gives you the virus.
I guess I'll give it about some more time and see how the results of other people come out.
These are common fears we heard from people in Far Rockaway, a beachside community that's lost approximately 460 residents to COVID so far, or about 1 of every 146 people. To be clear, public health officials around the world say the vaccine is extremely safe and effective. 170 million people in the U.S. have gotten a shot, and side effects are limited.
It's surprising that it's taking so much effort to get people in Far Rockaway vaccinated. There's a number of incentives that are being given to individuals to get them vaccinated. However, you have to be very, very careful on what the incentives are, because it can actually be counterproductive at some point.
It actually makes me more skeptical because you're giving me incentives to go get vaccinated. I mean, I never got an incentive to get a flu shot.
A lot of people in my community don't trust the government. As far as it goes, I think I'm gonna get it. I think I'm gonna just do it, get it over with. Might be best.
What changed your mind?
Family, friends, people.
Once someone gets vaccinated and they start talking to other people about it, it starts snowballing. And little by little, the interest has been increasing because they've seen their neighbors get it and their neighbors are fine.
The Joseph P. Adabo Family Health Center has been at the front lines of getting Far Rockaway vaccinated. Their hard work is paying off. They told us they recently vaccinated 600 people in one weekend. That's while mass vaccination sites have become ghost towns, and Governor Andrew Cuomo pushes for a community-driven approach in low-rate areas.
We still need to do more outreach to work with those people who are nowhere near contemplating getting the vaccine.
Have you been vaccinated?
I refuse. Why are you black telling me to get vaccinated?
The health center also deploys an outreach group to meet their neighbors where they are, informing them about the vaccine and listening to their concerns.
This is not, we're tired of being beaten by the cops. We're tired of being subject.
So what I'm hearing you say is there are a lot of things that need to be addressed before we even get to this. When you work in communities and populations that are underserved, this is a conversation in terms of resources that you're going to have every single day, because discrimination is a thing, and Far Rockaway is a huge immigrant population, and so there are barriers you have to address before you talk about the vaccination.
Not every conversation ends in a vaccination sign-up, but the team hopes their commitment to the community makes an impact in the long run, even if it takes talking to one person at a time.
He might not go out tomorrow and get the vaccination, but it gives him a little bit more knowledge and things for him to sit in and think about. We're not doing this for them, we're doing this with them. And so it's very important that we give them the space to, A, let us know what's going on, what they truly need, and also let them know that this vaccination is here, I've been vaccinated, I'm good. The whole team as in Women of Color has been vaccinated, and it gives them a sense of comfort of knowing people who look like them, who can empathize with them, who've been in similar experiences, have taken this vaccination, has this trust, and it gives a lot more leeway for them to want to get vaccinated.
Well, the FDA ordering 60 million doses of the Johnson & Johnson COVID vaccine to be destroyed. Federal regulators say the batches, quote, are not suitable for use, citing that they may be contaminated. The doses were made at Emergent Biosolutions in Baltimore, Maryland. This comes as questions grow surrounding the safety of vaccines for children. NBC News medical contributor Dr. Kavita Patel joins me now. Great to see you, Dr. Patel. Let's start with the 60 million vaccine doses being dumped. I mean, if this story sounds familiar to our viewers, that's because this is not the first time this same plant in Baltimore has had problems with contamination. So what does the future of manufacturing and distribution look like at this plant?
Yeah, Simone, you're asking the right question. And by the way, this is, as you pointed out, not just with COVID-19 vaccine manufacturing, there has been a history of citation. So I think the future of manufacturing with this plant seems very limited. And certainly because we have this rigorous FDA oversight, Simone, we have other manufacturers that have been very adherent and have had kind of the seal of approval for compliance. So I want people to be reassured, though, this doesn't affect the United States supply. It doesn't really affect kind of our ability to get all the people that you were talking about in Far Rockaway vaccinated.
But here's the thing, though. So the FDA also announced that 2 batches of the vaccine from that same Baltimore facility are safe to use. But we're kind of getting mixed messages here. I mean, I don't know that you can blame people out there for being a little bit concerned about the safety of these ones that have been approved for use.
Yeah, and to be clear, 10 million doses that they've said can be used, although they did put an asterisk on it, Simone. They did kind of say, it's up to the people to consider whether they want to use it. I think you're bringing up if you go to the grocery store and someone says, hey, this milk didn't expire, but if it doesn't smell very good, you shouldn't drink it. We're in a similar situation where people in general, now that we have choices, are not necessarily going to want to use vaccine that has even a hint of that contamination. And honestly, it's just J&J, this Johnson & Johnson vaccine, as you know and covered, has been plagued with issues kind of almost since it was authorized. So it's unfortunate, though, because it's so convenient. It's one dose. But I know that especially clinics like mine, hospitals, we're trying to make sure that we're using the shelf doses we have, and we are not necessarily taking any of those doses that the FDA doesn't even have kind of the security to note 10 million that we don't know exactly what to do with.
It is unfortunate because this just adds to those voices that are vaccine hesitant, which we know has been such a hurdle for us as we try to come out of this pandemic. But I want to switch gears now to the Pfizer and Moderna vaccine and teenagers. So the Centers for Disease Control has scheduled an emergency meeting to investigate a potential link between the vaccines and a heart inflammation issue in 16 to 24-year-olds. How serious is this?
Yeah, it's serious in the sense that now we're seeing enough data to show that what we're seeing, the real world evidence for young, mostly men who have this inflammation of the heart, myocarditis, is more than what we would have expected, Simone. So that is serious, but it's not serious enough to change our guidance about giving vaccines and recommending them for anyone over the age of 12. I do think it's a very good conversation to have, especially for parents with their pediatrician or primary care doctor. It's very rare. Remember, it's a little over 260 of these infections out of millions of doses. But the key here is making sure that if you have received a mRNA, Moderna or Pfizer, remember Moderna is still only an 18 and above, but if you receive one of those vaccines, we usually see it within 3 to 4 days after getting the doses. So if you have any chest pain, tightness, kind of shortness of breath, just something that's off, get to a doctor. Make sure you're evaluated.
Really important to keep things in perspective here when it comes to how rare some of these conditions are. Dr. Patel, thank you so much. Well, as we all settle into a more normal post-pandemic life, consumer prices are soaring. Everything from clothes to cars are a lot more expensive. So what's behind the spike? NBC News correspondent Sam Brock explains.
Simone, the CPI, or Consumer Price Index, is a look really at a basket of goods to give you a sense of where inflation is going. But right now, there's no question, cars are driving the surge, and not just new cars, which are up about 3% year over year. Used cars are up almost 30%. And it's not just vehicles, some staples as well, from food to household goods, are edging up. But consumer experts warn right now that there could be more danger lurking around the corner.
With Americans eager to make up for lost time, many are taking off on long delayed trips, but prices are also taking off. Flights, cars, and even furniture will cost you more, in some cases a lot more.
In terms of rising ingredient prices, material prices, labor prices, transportation prices, it truly is the perfect storm.
A storm that's caused a 5% rise in inflation year over year. That's the biggest jump in more than a decade. Maybe nowhere is that more evident than on used car lots.
What is the biggest reason you think inflation is going up for cars?
Basically no inventory.
At this car factory dealership in South Florida, General Manager Gianni Garcia says just acquiring vehicles has been harder. His company choosing to eat those higher costs as much as 30%.
We have a lot of repeat customers. So what we have done was basically cut everything what we were making.
Some parents like Justin Bergen, a single father of 3, worry more about escalating food bills.
There was a time when my already slim budget could keep us going for a good week and a half between grocery trips, but it's getting increasingly difficult to have a full shopping cart.
The Consumer Brands Association flagging warning signs behind your barbecue basics. Certain items like the pork and hot dogs up 24%, and soybeans and veggie burgers shooting up 68%. Government data shows overall food costs have risen 2% for now, though that's the tip of the iceberg. The airfare price index has soared 24% annually, and clothes increasing 5.5%, with people returning to work and school. But for those feeling jittery about the future, some important context.
Prices are up significantly compared to where we were last year, but last year we were shut down. If you compare them to where we were in 2019, it's really not a dramatic increase.
As far as cars are concerned, the increase just month over month, Simone, was about a third of overall inflation. What we're hearing from experts right now, obviously there are labor shortages, parts shortages. The more people that you can get back out in the workforce and the more trucks you can get out on the road would help to stem the tide in those increases. It's the very latest here in Miami. Simone, let me send it back to you.
Well, a bill designating the site of the Pulse nightclub massacre a national memorial is heading to President Biden's desk. Tomorrow marks 5 years since the mass shooting at a gay nightclub in Orlando, 49 lives lost in the middle of Pride Month in what was the deadliest incidence of violence against the LGBTQ community in modern U.S. history. NBC Out associate editor Joe Yerkeba joins me now. Joe, with the Senate unanimously passing the legislation and President Biden expected to sign it into law, how are survivors of the attack and the LGBTQ community at large responding?
It really means a lot to them. Survivor Brandon Wolf thanked the Florida delegation for recognizing the community's hallowed ground in a tweet. And then Pulse nightclub also issued a statement on social media thanking the senators who helped pass the bill. And they said, quote, "This recognition from both the House and Senate means so much to the LGBTQ plus community. Hashtag we will not let hate win." So it really means a lot to the community as a whole.
And Joe, on the other hand, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is facing backlash for signing this new state budget that would cut funding for the LGBTQ community. Are Pulse survivors going to be impacted by this?
Yes, advocates say they will be. The budget that the governor signed last week didn't include $150,000 that the legislature had designated for the Orlando United Assistance Center, which serves Pulse survivors and their families. And advocacy organization Equality Pride said that the cuts represented the entirety of funding for LGBTQ programs in the state budget. So they say it will make it harder for survivors to get mental health support services.
And we're hearing that these same cuts could also hurt LGBTQ homeless youth. What are you hearing about that?
Yeah, he also vetoed $750,000 for a community center that houses LGBTQ youth experiencing homelessness. He's also signed a bill that bans trans students from playing on the sports teams that align with their gender identity. So activists say that, though this recognition of the Pulse nightclub as a national memorial is important and powerful, it's more of a symbolic bill. And at the same time, the state is passing legislation that will harm LGBTQ people and contributes to, what they say is the anti-LGBTQ sentiment that leads to violence against them.
I think we all remember where we were when we found out about that horrific shooting at the Pulse nightclub. So thank you so much, Joe, for bringing us this reporting.
Of course.
Well, human smugglers, or coyotes, are using Facebook to find customers who are desperate to cross the U.S. border. That's according to the Tech Transparency Project. NBC News technology correspondent Jake Ward actually visited a migrant shelter in Tijuana where a pastor spends hours on Facebook warning migrants not to waste their money or risk their lives.
On Facebook, you can find a car for sale, book a vacation, and arrange to be smuggled into the United States. It's as simple as typing viajes en Estados Unidos. And boom, here's a list of public Facebook groups openly offering to smuggle people across the border. In a new report, the Tech Transparency Project says that Facebook has become the preferred platform for so-called coyotes and the desperate migrants they prey on.
Like any business, the cartels have been looking to diversify their financial resources through human smuggling, and unfortunately, Facebook has given them a free one-stop shop to do that.
So we went to see for ourselves and traveled to a shelter in Tijuana full of families from Central America. Most have been deported from the U.S. after buying passage from coyotes. People here are telling us that they've been communicating with coyotes to try to get across the U.S. border, and they communicate with them directly, either on WhatsApp or on Facebook itself. They spent thousands of dollars, years of their lives, and then wound up here in Tijuana with nothing. The going rate is $9,000 for an adult, $7,000 for children, according to people here. It's an established online market. And after finding a coyote on Facebook, communications switched to WhatsApp. This man, escaping violence in Honduras, told us he spent 4 years in Belize saving his $9,000. He made it across the border, but was deported. In a statement, Facebook told us in part they use technology, people, and partnerships to combat ways our platform may be used by those who want to harm people. Pastor Gustavo Banda, who runs the shelter, spends hours each week doing battle with coyotes online, trying to warn people away from them.
They actually assure people that in 5 days you will have legal papers to cross to the U.S. Migrants are desperate, and they'll believe the smugglers.
The pastor is showing me chats in this group in which people are saying, I want to get across, I want to do this, that, the other. And here's somebody writing, can I write you privately? Which he's saying is probably a coyote. Yeah, definitely. It must make you angry to do this all day.
Yes, I get angry. The coyotes paint a perfect picture of the journey. But I see the people when they arrive, sick or dying.
And Jake Ward joining us now from New York. Jake, like you, I've spent time with families who have used some of these human smugglers to bring members of their family across the border. And when you have a new administration in the White House, you've got desperation, fear. I mean, all of this creates an environment that is just ripe for manipulation. So how does misinformation factor into all this?
Well, it is certainly a huge factor, Simone. The Tech Transparency Project, which is behind that explosive report, which we were off to Mexico to investigate, says that misinformation is a huge problem, that in fact it has been used by coyotes as a sort of marketing tactic, using the possible change in policy on the part of the Biden administration at the border to spread falsehoods that suddenly the border is open or that tourist visas are going to be observed again. And as a result, it becomes this flood that they say really cannot be controlled. I mean, you have the State Department, in theory, putting out small bits of information on social media to say, you can actually apply for asylum in this way, and here are the legal avenues available to you. But that does not seem to be any match for the incredible flood of misinformation and convenience that we see both for customers and coyotes in this case.
Yeah, absolutely. And this pastor that you met, I mean, he's just one man trying to warn people. That's a big job for one man. So what are you hearing from Facebook? Like, are they trying to shut down these groups or at least counter the message that's coming from coyotes?
You know, we spoke to Facebook several weeks ago and asked to see the inner workings of how they are combating this. We did not get specifics from them. You know, there is definitely the sense that, you know, they have other options available to them. We've seen, for instance, after the January 6th insurrection, Facebook actually made it such that civic and political groups were no longer recommended to you in your feed. And that was an effort to cut off misinformation, to cut off what they saw as obviously a dangerous vein. Well, in this case, we have not seen them make similar cases. They have taken down groups when they have been informed of them, although that's not always been the case. And it is not clear at this point what sort of may happen next. Again, they say partnerships, people, and technology are helping them to improve their enforcement, and that smuggling is against the rules, and they will enforce that. But certainly an incredible amount is getting through, causing an open market for coyotes here, Simone.
Well, Jake, thank you so much for going there and bringing us this story. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Simone.
A terrifying moment in Austin, Texas, where a boat carrying 4 women nearly went over the Longhorn Dam. Police say the electric boat got caught up in a current. Rescuers responding just in time and lowered life vests to the women before using another boat to pull them to safety. Luckily, none of the passengers were hurt, but definitely an adrenaline rush. We'll be right back. All right, this is one you have to see to believe. Peacocks wreaking havoc in some Los Angeles neighborhoods. This is true. There are wild peacocks in the urban area of Los Angeles, and they are loud. Some people love them. Others just want some peace and quiet. So I went looking for some myself, and here's what I found. We're hunting peacocks. We didn't have to look very far. So we're completely surrounded right now. There's one right there, 2 more down there, and another one just crossed back there. The peafowl population is overwhelming some suburbs outside of Los Angeles, and their presence here is ruffling a few feathers. Is it fair to call it an invasion?
Yeah, I'd call it that. I mean, it was a very quiet neighborhood until they arrived.
Peter Salter would know. He's been nesting in East Pasadena for over 30 years.
They create a lot of noise. They create a lot of waste, and they see the reflection in cars on the street. They start pecking at the reflection because they're really stupid. It's damage to cars.
The birds are native to South Asia, not Southern California, and the county's efforts to contain them clearly aren't working. Residents here tell us the majority want to see them humanely relocated, but about 30 to 40% want them to stay.
I love the wildlife. I appreciate it. How many people can say you grew up around peacocks?
Across the street from Peter, the flamboyant pheasants are welcome here. Stephanie Murphy names them.
Yeah, pretty boy.
And feeds them. Was Snow White your favorite Disney character?
I love Snow White.
I knew it. A new ordinance sponsored by Los Angeles County Supervisor Catherine Barger would ban residents from feeding the peafowl. But the question is, will that be effective?
The people around here who love these birds, it's not going to stop them.
Are you one of those people?
I am one of those people, and I will find a way.
We tried tracking down one of the local residents accused of all this foul behavior. Excuse me, sir. Do you have anything to say to your critics?
He declined to comment.
Sir.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.